The poem is tucked beneath a ceramic bowl of butternut squash soup, folded once on a square of lined paper torn from a composition notebook. And when Genevieve Harrington, CEO of Harrington Dynamics, the woman whose name is etched into the glass facade of this 40-story tower in downtown Philadelphia, lifts her lunch tray from the cafeteria counter, she doesn't notice it at first, not until the paper slips free and flutters to the marble floor like a small white wing, and she bends to pick it up, unfolds it, reads the first line, and feels something crack open inside her chest that she hasn't felt in years. The handwriting is neat but unhurried. The ink is blue. The words describe a woman who carries the weight of glass buildings on her shoulders but forgets the weight of rain on a pedal. And at the bottom, there is no name, just a single sketch of a sparrow. Across the cafeteria, standing behind the stainless steel serving line in a white kitchen uniform stained with the morning's tomato bisque, Bennett Mercer watches her read it. He is 42 years old, broad-shouldered, with dark auburn hair that curls slightly at his temples and a jaw darkened by permanent 5 o'clock shadow. His hands are large and calloused, hands that have chopped 10,000 onions and wiped 10,000 counters, but if you look closely, the tips of his fingers are stained with ink, not grease. He wears a wedding ring on a thin silver chain around his neck. It catches the fluorescent light as he breathes. He watches her read the poem, and then he looks away, picks up a ladle, and goes back to stirring the soup as though nothing has happened at all. Harrington Dynamics occupies one of the tallest buildings on Market Street, a monument of steel and tinted glass that reflects the Philadelphia skyline back at itself. The lobby alone is the size of a cathedral, white marble floors, a reception desk carved from a single slab of walnut, and a digital ticker that scrolls stock prices in soft blue light. 1,200 people work here. Analysts, engineers, vice presidents, marketing directors, legal teams. They move through the building like blood through veins, purposeful and fast. The cafeteria sits on the second floor, behind frosted glass doors marked with a small brass plaque that reads, Café Commons. It serves 600 meals a day. The kitchen operates from 5:30 in the morning until 7 at night, and the staff, 9 people in total, work in a space the size of a modest apartment, navigating around each other with the practiced choreography of people who have shared tight quarters for years. Bennett Mercer has worked here for 4 years. He arrives each morning at 5:15, parks his 12-year-old silver Civic in the garage on Chestnut Street, and walks through the service entrance with his daughter's lunchbox in one hand and a thermos of black tea in the other. He preps vegetables, stirs soups, plates salads, and runs the serving line during the lunch rush. His co-workers know him as quiet, dependable, the kind of man who fixes the dishwasher himself rather than wait 3 days for maintenance to send someone. They know he has a daughter. They know his wife passed. They don't know much else. What they don't know, what nobody in this building knows, is that Bennett Mercer holds a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry from University College Dublin. That before he came to America, he published 2 collections with a small press in Galway. That he taught undergraduate literature for 6 years at a university where students packed his lectures because he could make Yeats feel like a fistfight and Dickinson feel like a love letter slipped under a door. That when his wife, Aoife, was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, he brought her and their young daughter to Philadelphia for treatment at a specialist hospital. That when Aoife died 17 months later, Bennett found himself alone in a foreign country with a child, a grief that sat on his chest like a stone, and credentials that American institutions didn't recognize without years of additional certification he couldn't afford and didn't have the energy to pursue. So, he cooked. He'd always been good at it. Our wife used to say his hands could make words and meals with equal tenderness, and the cafeteria job came with health insurance, which Wren needed for her speech therapy appointments. Sometimes, in the early mornings before the kitchen staff arrived, Bennett would stand at the prep station with his eyes closed and remember Dublin. The lecture hall in the old arts building, with its wooden seats worn smooth by decades of students. The way the rain sounded against the tall windows while he read Heaney aloud, between my finger and my thumb slash the squat pen rests, and watched 20-year-olds realize for the first time that poetry was not about rhyming couplets and greeting cards, but about the terrifying, exhilarating act of telling the truth. He remembered the night his first collection was published. A small launch in a bookshop on Grafton Street, the rain hammering outside. Maybe 40 people crammed between the shelves. A wife stood at the back with Wren in her arms. Wren was tiny then, barely walking, and when Bennett read the title poem about a man who builds a house from words because he cannot afford stone, a wife's face did something he'd never seen before. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She looked at him the way you look at the horizon, with the quiet certainty that what you are seeing is endless. He carried that look with him across an ocean. He carries it still, pressed between the pages of grief like a flower that refuses to lose its color. The second collection came 6 months before the diagnosis. He never promoted it. He never did readings. The books sit in a box under Wren's bed, beside a wife's scarves and a pair of earrings she used to wear on Sundays. Wren knows they're there. Sometimes, late at night, Bennett hears her pull the box out and turn the pages, reading her father's old words in the dark. Wren. She is the reason for everything. She's a young girl with the same dark auburn curls as her father. Though hers fall past her shoulders in loose spirals, she refuses to let anyone brush except him. She's small-framed, quiet, observant in the way children become when the world has already shown them something heavy. She carries a worn leather journal everywhere. The cover is cracked and the pages are swollen with pressed flowers, ticket stubs, and her own drawings. Her fingers are always stained with watercolor. And she has a stutter. It arrived after a wife's death. The speech therapist said it was common. Trauma, rearranging the architecture of language in a child's mouth. Wren could write beautifully, could draw with a precision that startled her teachers. But when she tried to speak, the words caught like fish in a net. And the frustration that crossed her face each time was the thing that could still bring Bennett to his knees. He writes poems for the same reason she draws. Because some things are too large to carry silently, and the page doesn't stutter. Their mornings are a ritual. Bennett wakes at 4:45 to a phone alarm he keeps under his pillow, so it won't wake Wren in the next room. He showers in the dark, dresses in the kitchen, and puts the kettle on. By 5, he's making Wren's lunch, always the same structure, because Wren finds comfort in pattern. A sandwich cut diagonally, an apple sliced into 8 pieces with the seeds removed, 2 cookies from the bakery on Frankfurt Avenue, and a small note. The note is always a poem. Not a real poem, not the kind he writes for the woman in the glass tower, but a silly one, the kind that makes a young girl laugh. Roses are red, your lunch is here. I hope the apple doesn't taste like a deer. They're terrible. Wren collects them. She has every single one, pressed into her journal between the birds and the flowers. At 5:10, he checks on her. She sleeps curled on her side, the leather journal on the pillow beside her, one hand resting on it the way you'd rest a hand on something precious. Her auburn curls are spread across the pillow like a small explosion. He pulls the blanket up to her chin, kisses her forehead, and leaves the apartment. The babysitter, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Gallagher who lives 2 floors down, arrives at 6:30 to get Wren ready for school. Bennett pays her in cash every Friday and also in soup, which Mrs. Gallagher claims is the best she's ever had, and which Bennett suspects she says because she is kind and because loneliness makes people generous with their praise. The poem started 3 months ago. It wasn't planned. Bennett had been plating a lunch special, grilled chicken over arugula, balsamic reduction, toasted pine nuts, and as he set the plate on the tray, he noticed the woman picking it up. She was tall and lean, dark brown hair pulled back in a sleek low bun, sharp green eyes behind reading glasses she slid on and off her nose as though embarrassed to need them. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse, pearl earrings, and shoes that probably cost more than Bennett's rent. She looked exhausted. Not the performative exhaustion of someone who wants you to know how busy they are, but the real kind. The kind that lives behind the eyes, in the slight tremble of hands that have held too many things for too long. He didn't know she was the CEO. Not then. That night, after Wren was asleep, he sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment in Fishtown and wrote a poem on a piece of notebook paper. It was about a woman he'd seen carrying a tray, as though it were another obligation in a life already overflowing with them. He folded it and slipped it under the plate the next day. He didn't expect anything. He certainly didn't expect what happened. The poems became a quiet ritual. 1 per week, folded beneath a bowl or tucked beside a napkin. Always on the same tray, the one that went to the executive line, the one picked up by the woman with the green eyes and the reading glasses. Bennett never signed them. He drew a sparrow at the bottom of each one, a habit from his Dublin days when he used to sketch in the margins of his manuscripts. He didn't know if she read them. He didn't know if she threw them away. He told himself it didn't matter, that the act of writing was enough, the way lighting a candle is enough even if no one else sees the flame. But she read them. Genevieve Harrington read every single one. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that the people we overlook every day might be carrying the most extraordinary gifts we've ever encountered. Genevieve Harrington became CEO of Harrington Dynamics 6 years ago when her father, Philip Harrington, suffered a stroke at a board meeting and collapsed across a conference table covered in quarterly reports. She was 32. She'd been groomed for leadership since college. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, 3 years at McKinsey, then back to the family company. But taking the chair wasn't the triumph everyone assumed. It was a rescue mission. The company was hemorrhaging. Her father's leadership had become erratic in the years before his stroke. Bad acquisitions, ignored warnings, a culture of fear that drove talent away. Genevieve inherited a sinking ship dressed up as a flagship. She spent 2 years putting out fires, restructuring divisions, laying off people she wished she could keep, and learning to sleep 3 hours a night in her office on a couch that cost $4,000 but felt like concrete. She saved the company. The stock price tripled. Business magazines wrote profiles. She was named to 3 different 40 under 40 lists, and she was lonely in a way that success does nothing to fix. Her apartment on Rittenhouse Square was beautiful and empty. She had colleagues, not friends. She had admirers, not partners. Men approached her with the careful calculation of people who had done the math on her net worth. Women at galas complimented her dress and then asked about investment opportunities. Her mother called once a week and spent the entire conversation talking about what Genevieve's sister was doing with her children, the implication landing like a dart every time. The poems were the first beautiful thing that had entered her life in years without wanting something from her. She kept them in the top drawer of her desk, in a small wooden box that had belonged to her father. She read them in the morning before the first meeting when the office was quiet, and the light through the floor-to-ceiling windows was still soft. They weren't love letters, not exactly. They were observations. A poem about the way elevator doors close like eyelids. A poem about hands that type and type and type but never touch anything alive. A poem about a woman who stands at the top of a glass tower and wonders if anyone below can see her. That last one made her cry. Silently, at her desk, with the door closed, tears sliding down her cheeks and landing on a quarterly earnings report. She had no idea who was writing them. On Sundays, Genevieve drives to a care facility in Bryn Mawr. The building is beautiful, stone facade, manicured gardens, a fountain in the courtyard that makes a sound like continuous applause. Her father's room is on the second floor overlooking the garden. It smells like fresh linen and something else, something medicinal that no amount of fresh linen can fully cover. Philip Harrington sits in a wheelchair by the window. He is 71. His hair, once dark and thick, is white and thin, combed neatly by a nurse who doesn't know that he used to comb it himself with 2 precise strokes while dictating emails into his phone. His hands rest in his lap. His eyes are open but unfocused, aimed at the garden but not seeing it. Genevieve sits beside him. She holds his hand. She tells him about the company, the earnings, the new product line, the restructuring of the European division, not because he understands, but because the rhythm of her voice seems to calm him, the way a radio left on in an empty room makes it feel less empty. Last Sunday, she brought one of the poems. She read it to him, the one about hands that type and type but never touch anything alive. She watched his face for any flicker of recognition, any sign that the words were reaching him. His thumb moved, just once, a faint pressure against her palm, like a moth brushing against a window pane. She drove home with the poem in her lap and cried at every red light. The discovery happens on a Tuesday in October, 3 weeks before the annual Harrington Dynamics Charity Gala. Genevieve has developed a habit of eating lunch in the cafeteria instead of having meals delivered to her office. She tells herself it's about being visible, about showing the staff that she's not above a plastic tray and a paper napkin. But the truth she won't admit to herself, is that she's looking, scanning the room for someone who might be watching her with the kind of attention those poems require. She notices Bennett on a day when the cafeteria is short-staffed and he steps out from behind the serving line to wipe down tables. He moves efficiently but without hurry, the way people move when they have made peace with repetitive work. She watches him pause at a table near the window, where the afternoon light catches the silver chain around his neck. He touches it, just briefly, a habit more than a gesture, and then continues wiping. It is the smallest moment. But Genevieve, who has spent 6 years learning to read the tiny signals people give when they think no one is watching, sees something in that touch. Tenderness. Loss. The kind of weight a person carries so carefully it becomes invisible to everyone except another person carrying the same thing. She comes back the next day. And the next. She begins timing her lunch to the less crowded hour, when she can sit near the window and watch the kitchen through the serving window without being obvious about it. She notices Bennett's ink-stained fingers. She notices the way he handles food, not carelessly, the way most cafeteria workers might after years of repetition, but with a kind of deliberate attention, like a man arranging words on a page. On Thursday, she arrives early and watches from the hallway as the trays are set out. She sees Bennett place a tray on the executive counter. She sees his hand, large, calloused, ink-stained at the fingertips, slide a folded piece of paper beneath the bowl. Her breath catches. She walks to the counter, picks up the tray, and pulls out the poem. She reads it standing there, in front of the frosted glass doors, while people stream past her in both directions. This one is about sparrows, about how they are the most common bird in any city, overlooked and ordinary, and yet their song is the first sound of morning, the proof that the world has decided to begin again. She looks up. Through the serving window, she sees Bennett watching her. Their eyes meet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looks away, picks up a cloth, and begins wiping the counter. Genevieve folds the poem carefully, puts it in her blazer pocket, and walks to the elevator. Her hands are shaking. She doesn't confront him, not right away. Instead, she does what any CEO would do. She pulls his personnel file. Bennett Mercer, 42, hired 4 years ago. Emergency contact, Wren Mercer, daughter. Previous employment, line cook at a restaurant in Fishtown, prep cook at a catering company in Center City. Education field, blank. No disciplinary actions, no complaints. 2 commendations from the facilities manager for repairing kitchen equipment on his own time. The file tells her nothing. So she goes to the cafeteria the next day and does something she hasn't done in 6 years as CEO of this company. She sits at the counter and talks to him. "The soup today," she says, setting her tray down. "What's in it?" Bennett looks up. His eyes are hazel, flecked with something darker. "Roasted red pepper and fennel," he says. His accent is faint but unmistakable, Irish, softened by years in America but still living in the vowels. Touch of smoked paprika. "It's good. Thank you." She waits. He doesn't fill the silence the way most people do when talking to someone who runs a $4 billion company. He simply stands there, cloth in hand, comfortable in the quiet. "I'm Genevieve," she says, and immediately feels foolish. Her name is on the building. "I know who you are," he says, and then, with the faintest trace of a smile that never quite reaches his mouth. "Bennett." "Bennett," she nods. "How long have you worked here?" 4 years, bit over." "Do you like it?" He considers this with more seriousness than the question probably warrants. "I like feeding people," he says finally. "There's an honesty to it. You make something, you put it on a plate, someone eats it, no quarterly reviews, no strategy decks, just nourishment." Genevieve stares at him. That word, nourishment, is the same word used in the 3rd poem he left her, the one about hands that forget what it feels like to make something real. "You've done other things before this," she says. It isn't a question. His jaw tightens just slightly. "I've done a few things." "What things?" He meets her eyes again. The look is steady, unguarded, and a little sad. "Things that didn't survive the crossing," he says quietly. Before she can respond, a coworker calls him back to the kitchen, and he turns away with a nod that is both polite and final, and Genevieve is left sitting at the counter holding a spoon she hasn't used, her soup growing cold. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the most beautiful words come from the people we've trained ourselves not to see. The conversations continue. Every day for 2 weeks, Genevieve finds reasons to be in the cafeteria during the slower hours. She asks about the menu. She asks about the kitchen. She asks about Ren, carefully, the way you approach someone's most precious thing, and watches Bennett's entire body change when he talks about his daughter. His shoulders drop. His voice warms. The permanent 5 o'clock shadow somehow looks softer. She draws, he tells her one afternoon, leaning against the counter while the kitchen behind him fills with the clatter of the dishwasher. Constantly, birds mostly, sparrows, starlings, wrens. Her mother named her after the bird, said wrens were proof that something small could fill an entire garden with sound. Her mother? Awaf. He says the name like a prayer, 2 syllables, each one held a moment longer than necessary. She passed, 5 years ago. Genevieve doesn't say she's sorry. She's learned that sorry is what people say when they don't know what else to offer, and she suspects Bennett has heard it so many times the word has lost its shape. My father had a stroke 6 years ago, she says instead. He's alive, but he doesn't. He doesn't know me anymore. Sometimes that feels like a kind of loss that doesn't have a name. Bennett looks at her, really looks at her, not at the blazer, not at the pearl earrings, not at the name that is etched into the building they're both standing in. He looks at her the way the poems look at her, like she is a person carrying something heavy who deserves to set it down. Ambiguous grief, he says softly. That's what they call it. When someone is gone but not gone. When you mourn a person who's still breathing. How do you know that term? He hesitates. Then, I used to read a lot, I still do. When Ren's asleep and the apartment's quiet, I read. She knows there's more. She can feel it the way you feel a room that has a door you haven't opened yet. But she doesn't push. Not yet. The gala is in 2 weeks, and Genevieve's assistant, a meticulous woman named Thea, has been managing the event planning with the precision of a military operation. The gala raises money for the Harrington Foundation's education initiatives, scholarships for first-generation college students, grants for public school arts programs, funding for adult literacy. It is the one night of the year Genevieve genuinely cares about, because it is the one thing her company does that has nothing to do with stock prices. This year, the theme is Words That Change Us. Each table will feature a printed card with a poem or passage selected by a Harrington Dynamics employee. Thea has been collecting submissions for weeks. Genevieve decides, on a whim that doesn't feel like a whim at all, to read one of Bennett's poems at the gala. Not to expose him, she still hasn't told him she knows, but because the poems deserve an audience larger than one woman eating soup at a counter. She chooses the 5th poem, the one about sparrows. She doesn't tell anyone who wrote it. Bennett finds out about the gala from a flyer taped to the kitchen bulletin board. Words That Change Us. Annual Charity Gala. Black tie. He takes down the flyer, reads it, and pins it back up. He won't be attending. Cafeteria workers don't attend the gala. They cater it. The week before the event, the kitchen is busier than usual. Bennett works double shifts, prepping hors d'oeuvres and desserts, his hands moving through pastry dough and charcuterie arrangements with the same careful precision he brings to everything. His co-worker, a younger man named Finn, notices the extra hours. You training for the Olympics of cheese plates? Finn asks, sliding a rack of champagne glasses toward the drying station. Bennett smiles. It's a rare thing, his smile, but it transforms his face entirely, softening the jaw, crinkling the corners of his hazel eyes. Just trying to make sure it's right. It's a cheese plate, Mercer. It's already right. Nothing's ever already right, Bennett says quietly. You have to make it right. Finn looks at him for a long moment, then shakes his head. You're a weird dude, Bennett. Good weird, but weird. That night, Bennett sits at the kitchen table after Ren is asleep, staring at a blank sheet of notebook paper. He hasn't written a poem in 2 weeks. The conversations with Genevieve have done something to the quiet space where the poems come from, not silenced it exactly, but changed its frequency. The poems used to be about a woman he observed from a distance, a figure moving through glass and marble. Now, she is real. She has a father who doesn't know her. She has a laugh that comes out startled, like she's surprised her body still knows how to make that sound. She drinks her coffee black and holds the cup with both hands, and when she reads the menu board, she mouths the words silently, and it is the most human thing Bennett has seen in years. He picks up the pen. He writes, "This poem is not about sparrows. It is about a woman who taught herself to fly by climbing a glass tower, and who forgot somewhere along the way that she was allowed to land. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to hear it." Now, back to the story. The gala takes place on the first Saturday of November. The Harrington Dynamics lobby has been transformed. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white peonies and eucalyptus, strings of warm light crisscrossing the ceiling like low-hanging constellations. A jazz quartet plays near the walnut reception desk. 300 guests mill about in black tie, holding champagne flutes and speaking in the carefully modulated tones of people who are used to being listened to. In the kitchen, Bennett and his team work behind a temporary service wall. He can hear the music, the laughter, the clink of glasses. He plates appetizers, smoked salmon on rye crisps, fig and goat cheese tartlets, prosciutto-wrapped melon, and sends them out through the swinging doors on silver trays. He doesn't expect to see Genevieve tonight. She's on the other side of the wall, in another world, wearing something that probably costs more than his car. He tells himself, this is fine. He tells himself the poems were never about closing the distance. They were about acknowledging that the distance existed and that something beautiful could cross it anyway. At 9 o'clock, the program begins. Genevieve takes the stage, a small riser near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline glittering behind her. She wears a dark emerald gown, her brown hair still in its sleek low bun, her reading glasses tucked into her hand. She looks composed. She always looks composed. But Bennett, watching through a gap in the service doors, can see the tightness in her shoulders, the way she grips the podium with one hand as though steadying herself against something invisible. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she says. Her voice is clear, practiced, but warm in a way that suggests she means it. This gala has always been about words, about the power of language to change a life, to open a door that someone didn't even know was closed. Every year we raise money for education, for literacy, for the belief that every person deserves the tools to tell their own story. She pauses, reaches for her reading glasses, puts them on. "This year I want to share something with you. Over the past 3 months I've been receiving poems, anonymous poems left on my lunch tray in the cafeteria downstairs. No name, no signature, just words in a small drawing of a sparrow." The room is quiet. 300 people watching. "I don't know who wrote them." She says this carefully, and Bennett, behind the service doors, feels his chest tighten. "But I want to read one tonight because it says something I think all of us need to hear, especially those of us who have spent so long climbing that we've forgotten what the ground feels like." She unfolds a piece of paper. Bennett recognizes it, the 5th poem, the one about sparrows. The notebook paper is creased from being carried in her pocket. She smooths it on the podium with both hands. And she reads. Her voice doesn't crack on the first stanza. It holds through the second. But on the third, the stanza about the sparrow that sings before dawn, not because anyone is listening, but because the song is the bird's way of proving to itself that morning is worth starting, her voice breaks. She stops, takes off her glasses, presses the back of her hand to her mouth. The room is completely still. "I'm sorry," she whispers into the microphone. Then she shakes her head. "No, I'm not sorry. I'm grateful. Whoever wrote this, wherever you are, thank you. You reminded me that I'm more than this building." The silence holds for 3 seconds, and then the room erupts into applause. Bennett stands behind the service doors with both hands pressed flat against the stainless steel counter, and he breathes, and he breathes, and he doesn't move. It is Finn who gives him away. Not maliciously. Finn doesn't have a malicious bone in his body, but with the blunt, well-meaning honesty of a 26-year-old who doesn't understand why a person would hide something beautiful. The Monday after the gala, the cafeteria is buzzing with talk about the CEO's speech. Everyone heard about it. The poem, the tears, the standing ovation. Someone recorded it on their phone and posted it to the company's internal social feed, where it gathered 400 hearts in 2 hours. Finn is restocking the salad bar when Genevieve walks in. She's back in her charcoal blazer, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and she looks different, lighter somehow, as though reading that poem publicly had relieved a pressure she'd been carrying. She approaches the counter. "Is Bennett here?" Finn grins. "The poet? Yeah, he's in back." Genevieve goes very still. "The poet?" Finn blinks. Then his eyes widen as he realizes what he's done. I mean, he just, he writes sometimes, like, on his breaks. I've seen him in the break room with his notebook. I just assumed I shouldn't have, forget I said anything." But Genevieve doesn't forget. She walks through the cafeteria doors, past the serving line and into the kitchen, where Bennett is standing at a prep table cutting carrots into precise, uniform sticks with a chef's knife. He looks up. He sees her face. He knows. "It's you," she says. Bennett sets down the knife. He wipes his hands on his apron. He meets her eyes with the same steady, unguarded look he always gives her, the look that says, "I see you, I have always seen you, and I have nothing to hide." "Yes," he says. "You wrote all of them?" "Yes." "Why?" He's quiet for a moment. Around them, the kitchen continues its noise, the hiss of a steam vent, the rattle of pans, the muffled bass of the dishwasher. He touches the ring on the chain around his neck. "Because I saw you," he says, "that first day. You picked up your tray like it weighed 100 pounds. And I thought, there's someone who's forgotten she's allowed to be tired, and I didn't know how else to tell you. You could have just spoken to me." He shakes his head, a faint, sad smile. "People like me don't speak to people like you. Not in this building, not in any building. We serve, we clean, we disappear. That's the contract. But a poem," he trails off. "A poem doesn't have a rank." Genevieve stares at him. The kitchen light is harsh and unflattering, fluorescent tubes that make everyone look slightly ill. But Bennett Mercer, in his stained white uniform, with his calloused, ink-stained hands and his faded Celtic knot tattoo and the wedding ring around his neck, looks like the most real thing she has seen in 6 years of running a company built on glass and projections. "You have an MFA," she says quietly. "From Dublin. I looked you up. After Finn, I looked you up. You looked me up. Bennett, you published 2 books. You were a professor." He picks the knife back up, not to cut anything, just to hold it, something for his hands. "That was another life. It doesn't have to be." "It does," he says, and now his voice has an edge, not anger, but the firmness of a man who has built walls for good reasons and doesn't appreciate someone testing them. "My daughter needs insurance. She needs stability. She needs a father who comes home at the same time every night and sits at the same table and asks about her day, and never ever makes her feel like she's the reason he gave something up. That's what she needs, not a poet." Genevieve is quiet. Then she says, "Can I meet her?" And Bennett looks at her like she said something in a language he'd forgotten he spoke. "If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that like button if you haven't already." Now, back to the story. He says no at first, not harshly, gently, the way he does everything, but firmly. Wren is his private world. She is the garden he tends behind every wall he's built. Introducing her to the CEO of the company where he cuts carrots for a living feels like opening a gate that can't be closed. But Wren, as she often does, makes the decision for him. It's a Wednesday afternoon, and Bennett has brought Wren to the office because her school let out early and the babysitter is sick. She sits in the break room with her leather journal, drawing birds with colored pencils, while Bennett finishes the lunch service. She's quiet. She's always quiet. But she is also curious, and when she hears a woman's voice on the other side of the kitchen doors, clear and warm, asking about the soup, she opens her journal to a blank page and writes, "Who is that?" She holds it up to Bennett when he comes back to check on her. "That's Ms. Harrington," he says. "She runs the company." Wren writes, "She sounds sad." Bennett kneels beside her. "What do you mean, love?" Wren writes. Her voice smiles, But the smile doesn't go all the way up. Bennett stares at his daughter, at this small, auburn-haired girl who can hear the architecture of a person's loneliness in 3 overheard sentences. He thinks about our wife. He thinks about how our wife always said Wren had ears that listened deeper than sound. "Would you like to meet her?" he asks. Wren nods. He brings her out to the cafeteria during the quiet hour, when the tables are mostly empty and the light through the windows is amber and long. Genevieve is sitting at her usual spot near the window, laptop open, soup untouched. She looks up and sees Bennett, and then she sees Wren, this small girl with auburn curls and paint-stained fingers and a leather journal clutched to her chest like a shield, and something in Genevieve's expression shifts. It's not pity. It's recognition. "Genevieve, this is Wren," Bennett says. "Wren, this is Ms. Harrington." Wren looks up at Genevieve. Then she opens her journal, writes something, and holds it up. The page says, "My dad writes poems about you." Bennett closes his eyes. Genevieve laughs, a real laugh, startled and unguarded, the kind she's forgotten she can make, and kneels down to Wren's level. "He does," Genevieve says, "and they're very beautiful." Wren writes, "He thinks you're lonely. Are you?" The question lands in the quiet cafeteria like a stone in still water. Genevieve looks at this child, this girl who cuts through pretense the way her father's poems cut through the noise of a life spent performing competence, and she answers honestly. "Yes," she says, "I am." Wren writes, "Me too sometimes, but my dad says lonely is just your heart making room for someone new." Genevieve looks up at Bennett. He's standing 3 feet away, hands in his apron pockets, watching his daughter do what he has never been able to do. Close the distance, cross the line, say the true thing without flinching. "She's remarkable," Genevieve whispers. "She's her mother's daughter," Bennett says. His voice is rough. Wren tugs at Genevieve's sleeve and writes one more thing. "Do you want to see my birds?" And Genevieve Harrington, CEO of a $4 billion company, sits cross-legged on the cafeteria floor with a young girl and looks at drawings of sparrows and wrens and starlings for 45 minutes while the afternoon light turns gold around them. And Bennett watches from the counter. And for the first time in 5 years, he doesn't touch the ring on the chain around his neck. The problem arrives in the form of a man named Sterling Pemberton. Sterling is the chairman of Harrington Dynamics Board of Directors, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s with the permanent expression of someone who has just tasted something slightly off. He's been on the board since Philip Harrington's era. He tolerates Genevieve because she's profitable. He respects her the way one respects a well-performing asset. He does not approve of the cafeteria worker. The rumors start within days of Wren's visit. Someone saw the CEO sitting on the floor of the cafeteria with a child. Someone else saw her lingering at the serving counter, talking to a kitchen worker for 20 minutes during the lunch rush. Someone else heard about the poems. Sterling calls a meeting. "Genevieve," he says, leaning back in his leather chair at the head of the boardroom table. "I'll be direct. There are concerns." "About what?" "About your judgment, specifically about your association with a member of the kitchen staff." Genevieve's spine straightens. "His name is Bennett Mercer." "I don't care what his name is. I care about optics. This company is publicly traded. You are its face, and you are spending your afternoons sitting on the floor of a cafeteria with a kitchen worker's child." "She was showing me her drawings." "I don't care what she was showing you." Sterling's voice is calm, measured, the practiced tone of a man who has ended careers over lunch. "You are a CEO. He's a cafeteria worker. There's a power differential that exposes this company to liability, and there's a public perception issue that could affect shareholder confidence. I'm advising you to end this, whatever this is, before it becomes a problem." Genevieve looks at him. She thinks about the poem in her desk drawer, the one about the woman who learned to fly by climbing a glass tower. She thinks about Wren holding up her journal with perfect, fearless honesty. She thinks about Bennett saying, "A poem doesn't have a rank." "No," she says. Sterling blinks. "Excuse me?" "I said no. You can note your concerns. You can bring them to a vote if you want, but I will not end a friendship because it makes the board uncomfortable that I have one." The meeting ends with the particular silence that follows when someone powerful has been told no for the first time in a long while. Bennett hears about the board meeting from Thea, Genevieve's assistant, who stops by the cafeteria to pick up a coffee and mentions it with the careful casualness of someone delivering a warning. "You should know," Thea says, stirring her latte, "that the board chair is not happy about your friendship with Genevieve." "I gathered. He's old guard. He thinks in hierarchies. To him, this is a violation of the natural order." Bennett nods. He's been the subject of hierarchies his entire American life. The foreigner whose degrees don't count, the widower whose grief is a curiosity, the cafeteria worker who is invisible until he's inconvenient. "I won't cause trouble for her," he says. Thea studies him. "That's exactly what I told her you'd say. She told me to tell you that you're not the trouble. He is." That evening, Bennett writes no poem. He paces his small apartment, touching the ring on the chain, and thinks about what it means to be a person who has taught himself to fit inside small spaces, and what happens when someone reaches in and tries to pull him out. Wren appears in the doorway of the living room, her journal open. She's drawn something new, not a bird this time, but two people standing on either side of a wall. One is tall, in a suit, the other is in an apron, and above them, bridging the wall, a sparrow is in flight, carrying a piece of paper in its beak. Bennett looks at the drawing for a long time. "That's beautiful, love," he says. Wren writes beneath it, "The bird doesn't care about the wall." The gala's impact continues to ripple. The internal social media post of Genevieve reading the poem has been shared externally. Someone screenshotted it, posted it to their personal account, and it went quietly viral among literary circles. A journalist from the Philadelphia Inquirer calls Harrington Dynamics' press office, asking about the anonymous cafeteria poet. Genevieve shuts it down. She refuses all press inquiries. She tells Thea to issue a statement saying the poem was shared with permission, but the author's privacy will be respected. But the gala has done something else. It has shaken loose conversations inside the company. Employees are talking about the poems, about the speech, about what it means that the most human moment their CEO has ever had in public was inspired by someone who makes their lunch. The head of the Arts Education Fund, a woman named Iris, reaches out to Genevieve with an idea. "What if we featured the poet at the Foundation's next event?" Iris suggests. "Not by name, just the poems. We could do a reading series. It aligns perfectly with the literacy mission." Genevieve goes to Bennett. She finds him in the break room, drinking tea, reading a paperback of Seamus Heaney with his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looks up when she knocks on the doorframe. The Foundation wants to feature your poems," she says. "Anonymously, if you want. A reading series for the Arts Education Fund." Bennett sets down his tea. "You're asking me to let other people read them. I'm asking if you want your words to do what they were always meant to do." He is quiet for a long time. Then, "They were meant for you." "Bennett, they were." He takes off his glasses, folds them carefully. "But you're right. They're bigger than me. They were always bigger than me. Our wife used to say that about poems. She said poems don't belong to the person who writes them. They belong to the person who needs them. Then let them belong to more people." He nods. Slowly, like a man stepping out of a room he's been hiding in for years. That night, he can't sleep. He lies on the narrow bed in his Fishtown apartment and listens to the sounds of the building. The neighbor's television through the wall, the hiss of the radiator, the distant percussion of a train on the elevated tracks 3 blocks east. He thinks about the last time he stood in front of an audience. A lecture hall in Dublin, 90 students, the smell of damp coats and instant coffee. He'd been someone then. Professor Mercer, the poet who could make Yeats feel like a fistfight. He'd worn a tweed jacket with elbow patches, and he'd believed, with the unquestioning confidence of a man who hadn't yet been tested by real loss, that words could change things. He's not that man anymore. He's a man who makes soup, a man whose greatest daily achievement is cutting carrots into sticks so uniform they could be measured with a ruler. A man who hides poems under bowls because the idea of handing them to someone face to face makes his hands shake. He gets out of bed and walks to Wren's room. She's asleep, her journal on the pillow, a colored pencil still loosely gripped in her paint-stained fingers. He gently extracts the pencil and sets it on the nightstand. She stirs but doesn't wake. He pulls the box from under her bed, opens it, takes out his first collection, a thin paperback with a blue cover, his name in small white letters at the bottom. He opens it to a random page and reads a poem he wrote 12 years ago about a man standing in a field, listening to nothing, and realizing that nothing was enough. He closes the book, puts it back, slides the box under the bed. He sits at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that grows cold while he stares at the wall. At 3 a.m, he picks up a pen and writes the new poem, the one about the door that was never locked. His hand is steady. The words come without effort, the way water moves downhill, and when he finishes, he reads it once, folds it, and puts it in his shirt pocket. He goes back to bed and sleeps for 2 hours, and when the alarm goes off, he is calm. The reading takes place 2 weeks later in the Harrington Foundation's community space, a converted warehouse in Kensington with exposed brick and steel beams, the kind of space that still smells faintly of its industrial past. 50 people attend. Students, teachers, foundation donors, a few Harrington Dynamics employees. Bennett reads his own poems. He stands at a wooden podium in his best shirt. A navy button-down Wren helped him pick out, the Celtic knot tattoo visible below his rolled sleeve. And he reads. His voice is different when he reads poetry. The Irish accent thickens. The words take on a rhythm that is almost musical, and the room goes still the way a room goes still when something true is being said. He reads the Sparrow poem. He reads the one about elevator doors. He reads a new one, written the night before in the kitchen while Wren slept, about a man who spent 5 years learning to live in a small space, and a woman who showed him that the door was never locked. Genevieve sits in the 3rd row. She doesn't cry this time. She watches. She listens. And when he finishes, she is the first person to stand. The applause is long and warm, and Bennett stands at the podium with his ink-stained fingers gripping the wood, and he looks out at the faces, strangers who have just heard pieces of his heart, and he thinks about Aowafe, who told him once that the hardest part of being a poet isn't writing. It's believing you deserve to be heard. Wren is sitting in the front row. She has been silent the entire reading, her journal open on her lap, her eyes wide. When the applause dies down, she stands up. She walks to the podium. She reaches for the microphone. Bennett's breath catches. Wren opens her journal. She looks out at the audience. And in a voice that trembles and catches and stutters on every other syllable, a voice that sounds like a bird learning to sing for the first time, she reads a poem she has written for her father. It is 4 lines long. It says, "My dad makes soup and words. Both of them are warm. He fills the bowls and fills the pages. And that's how he fills the world." The room is silent. Then someone in the back begins to cry. Then someone else. Then the room erupts, not into applause, but into something deeper, a collective exhale, the sound of 50 people being reminded of something they'd forgotten. Bennett kneels beside his daughter. He wraps his arms around her. Wren presses her face into his shoulder, and her small body shakes. But she is smiling. He can feel it against his neck, and he holds her and whispers, "You did it, love. You did it." Genevieve is standing, tears on her cheeks, both hands pressed over her mouth, and she thinks, this is what words are for. Sterling Pemberton resigns from the board 3 weeks later. It isn't dramatic. No speech, no public statement. He simply informs the other board members that he's stepping down for personal reasons, which is the corporate euphemism for a man who has realized the world has changed and he hasn't changed with it. The truth is more nuanced. After the reading, a video of Wren's poem circulated internally. Someone recorded it on their phone, just like the gala, and the response was overwhelming. Employees wrote to Genevieve, wrote to HR, wrote to the foundation. They said the reading had meant something. They said it had reminded them why they worked at a company that funded arts education. They said it made them proud. Sterling looked at the tide and understood he was standing on the wrong side of it. His replacement, nominated by Genevieve and approved unanimously, is Iris, the head of the Arts Education Fund, a woman who believes that a company's value is measured not only in what it earns, but in what it gives. 6 months later, the Harrington Foundation's reading series has grown. It meets monthly in the Kensington warehouse. Poets, essayists, novelists, high school students, retirees, factory workers, nurses, anyone who has something to say and needs a room that will listen. Bennett coordinates the series. He still works in the cafeteria 3 days a week, by choice, not necessity. The other 2 days, he teaches a creative writing workshop at a community college in North Philadelphia, using his Dublin MFA and a letter of recommendation from a CEO, who doesn't usually write letters of recommendation, but made an exception. He and Genevieve are together. Not in the way tabloids would describe it, if tabloids cared about a cafeteria worker and a CEO in Philadelphia. Not with grand gestures or Instagram posts or gala appearances arm in arm. Together in the quiet way, dinners at his apartment in Fishtown, where Genevieve sits at the small kitchen table and eats pasta that Bennett makes from scratch, while Wren shows her the latest birds in her journal. Weekend mornings at the Rittenhouse Square Farmers Market, where Bennett buys fennel and Genevieve carries the bag, and Wren runs ahead to look at the flower stalls. Evenings on the couch, where Bennett reads Heaney aloud and Genevieve falls asleep with her head on his shoulder and her reading glasses still on. Genevieve still runs Harrington Dynamics. She is still sharp, still driven, still the woman whose name is on the building. But she is different in ways only someone paying close attention would notice. She leaves the office by 6. She eats lunch in the cafeteria, at the counter where she can see the kitchen. She wears the pearl earrings less often and a small silver sparrow pendant more. Bennett still writes poems. He leaves them in different places now, on her desk, in her coat pocket, tucked into the visor of her car. The sparrow at the bottom is still there, but now sometimes he draws 2 sparrows. Wren's stutter is better, not gone, maybe never gone entirely, but better. She still writes more than she speaks, still fills journals with birds and poems and drawings of the 2 people she loves most in the world. But last week, at the monthly reading, she stood at the podium and read a poem she'd written without stuttering once. It was about a sparrow and a wren sharing a branch. When she finished, she looked out at the audience, and she said, clearly, without a single catch, "Thank you." Bennett was in the back of the room. He didn't clap. He pressed both hands over his face and breathed, and the tears came. And he let them, because some things are too large to carry silently. On a Tuesday evening in spring, Bennett is closing up the cafeteria kitchen. The building is quiet. Most employees have gone home, and the lobby far below is dim and still. He wipes down the last counter, hangs up his apron, and walks to the elevator. He rides it to the 40th floor. Genevieve's office is glass on 3 sides, the city spread out below like a circuit board of light. She's still at her desk, reviewing something on her laptop, her reading glasses on, a cup of cold tea beside her. She looks up when he knocks. "Done for the day?" she asks. "Done for the day." He crosses the office and sets a folded piece of paper on her desk. She picks it up, unfolds it, reads it. This poem is about a man who spent 5 years believing he was invisible, and a woman who looked at him and said, "I see you." It is about glass towers and kitchen steam and a child's drawing of a sparrow crossing a wall. It is about the distance between a serving line and a boardroom, and how that distance is both enormous and imaginary. It is about 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely place, not despite the gulf between them, but because of it, because the gulf was the thing that made the bridge worth building. At the bottom, there are 2 sparrows, and beneath them, for the first time, a name. Bennett. Genevieve sets the poem down. She takes off her glasses. She stands, walks around the desk, and takes his ink-stained hands in hers. "Stay," she says. "I'm not going anywhere," he says. Outside the glass walls, the Philadelphia skyline burns with the last light of the day, and somewhere in the city below, a sparrow sings, not because anyone is listening, but because the song is proof that the world has decided, once again, to begin. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that love and beauty don't follow organizational charts, please share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories proving that the most extraordinary people are often the ones the world walks right past. Tell us in the comments, has a stranger's kindness ever changed the way you see your own life?